Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of E-Coffee with Experts. I'm your host, Matt Fraser. And on today's show, I have with me a very special guest, Denise Pane. Denise is the founder and CEO of Access Design Studio, the leading expert agency in creating ADA-compliant accessible websites, headquartered in Camino, California. She has a Bachelor's of Arts degree with a major in psychology from the University of California and is a lifelong advocate of people with disabilities, starting with her own Special Olympian brother. She is an accredited accessibility expert and a member of the International Association of Accessibility Professionals and the World Wide Web Consortium. When not building ADA-compliant websites for clients, Denise enjoys backpacking in the outdoors, kayaking in the South Fork of the American River, and spending time with her friends and family, as well as her 4 dogs. Thank you so much, Denise, for being here. Pleasure to have you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Matt.
Yeah. Hey, so Denise, how would your university professors describe you as a student?
That's a great question and fun. Exuberant, hardworking, social, and I think a little bit at that time, a little bit wild.
Oh, okay. Right on. How would you say you've changed between then and now in the person that you are?
Not a lot. Still exuberant, still a little bit wild, still super hardworking.
Right on. That's awesome. Hey, what was the turning point that made you want to become an entrepreneur?
That's a great question. And the reality is this was 22 years ago. I didn't even know what the word meant. I was teaching high school in the San Francisco Bay Area, and all I wanted to do was be on the South Fork of the American River kayaking. And so the guy who taught me kayaking said, "Hey, if you'll come up and teach kayaking for me, I'll have someone tutor you in, web design so that you can, work on my website." And I said, the answer is yes. And what is web design? Literally.
Oh, wow.
But all I cared about was moving up to the South Fork of the American River. And then when I got into web design and working with clients and branding and design, it was just the exact right fit.
Wow, that's amazing. That's an awesome story.
Thank you.
Hey, do you think there's a lack of female representation in the digital marketing industry in regards to web design? And if so, why do you think that's the case?
Oh my gosh, you have the best questions. So 22 years ago when I started, our focus for about 20 years was women-owned businesses because of exactly what you said. I kept having women business owners coming to me and say, I tell my designer I want this, but I get run over and I'm not listened to. And, so they just felt like their voice wasn't heard. And in 20 years, it still exists, of course, at some level, but it has changed so much. And I'm so thrilled that because I just personally think the world will be a better place, the global, economy, everything will be better when there's more equal representation across all demographics. So it has increased a lot in the last 20 years. There's still room to grow, but I'm happy to say that, women are much more represented in the industry.
That's awesome. Hey, do you think there are any advantages that women have when it comes to entrepreneurship?
I do, because women tend to be a little bit more flexible and go with the flow and figure things out as we're going and solve problems on the fly. Men do that as well, of course, but because of the way we're thinking, the way we think, that there's a lot of that. There's a lot more. And, I hope nobody is offended by this, but a lot more sort of heart-centered compassion. And a lot of business owners want that infused in their brand.
Yeah. You're not going to offend anybody. That was maybe my follow-up question was, do you think that it's because women have more empathy?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. And in some ways have more emotional. I don't know if this is true for all women, but it seems to me that women, and this is, there are the exceptions and not the rules, like paint everybody this way, but for the most part have more emotional intelligence, I would say.
I would agree. And that's part of building a powerful brand, right? We're really over time, people are understanding that a brand isn't just your logo and something that looks pretty. Like it's so much more than that. And so, like you said, women have that compassion and that empathy and that real heart-centered connection to the vision and the mission of businesses. So we can infuse that in the brand sort of just more naturally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was my mother's son, so I have that a little bit more than most most men.
Bless your mama. Bless your mama. Thank you, mama.
Anyway. Do you have any role models or mentors who have helped you along your journey as an entrepreneur?
So many. I mean, that is, I think, the key to being a successful entrepreneur is finding those mentors that will sit with you and they'll be eye to eye with you and they will support you. They'll tell you when you're going awry. They'll share their deepest secrets of success. That's key, is that level of trust. I've had so many. And I provide the same for up and coming entrepreneurs.
Wow, you just answered my follow-up question.
Yeah.
How do you find them though? Like for instance, a lot of successful people are busy. Like, do you just, I don't know, how do you find them? Like, how do you find those relationships? Is it through LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Is it through
I find them,
I don't know.
I find them initially, of course, it was more in person because we didn't have all of the, and so I would go to, for me, they've been women. I would go to NABO, the National Association of Women Business Owners. I became a member and I went to their meetings. And so for me, it was very in person at first. And now it is, again, it's joining. I'm very specific about the groups that I join and the business owners, the entrepreneurs or whatever that are in them, and then creating that relationship and then asking very straightforwardly, it's a very, for me, it's a very structured relationship. And then in terms of those that I mentor I live in the Tahoe area of California. And so I started a business women's networking group because we didn't have anything. We were all having to drive over an hour down to Sacramento.
Oh, wow.
So I started a networking group in my
started one.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, it has about 400 members, and then I started a business women's mastermind. So if it doesn't exist, create it, right?
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome.
Thank you.
What about like peer-to-peer groups? Like, for instance, I was reading a book recently, it's the 12-week year, and they talked about the statistics of people who go further with someone than on their own. Like the statistics, even people who were diagnosed with life-threatening like diseases, conditions that if they didn't change, they were going to die. And those who partnered with peers for accountability actually were to bring about change. So do you also like have people that you meet with on a regular basis, not just mentors, but maybe even peers in non-competing industries for goal accountability is what I'm trying to get at.
Absolutely. That is one of the key groups that I'm in is of my peers. And so they're making, similar income level, right? Because there are different, new level, new devil, right? So similar income level, similar drive, similar sort of thought leading, et cetera. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's at least once a week, but usually maybe 2 or 3. There are many of us that we will meet as a group, maybe once or twice a month, but we're meeting individually all the time. That accountability, that like, what are you facing? That like, I'm losing my mind because of this struggle. Like I could not be where I am without that.
Wow. I'm so glad you shared that. This book, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, the 12-week year. It's a fascinating book. I'm going to be implementing the principles in my own life. And you basically plan your tasks. You don't look at a year as a year anymore. You look at a year as 12 weeks and you plan out your goals. And it could be like a specific goal of losing 20 pounds, but then what are you going to do? All the tactics you're going to do and you backwards plan to begin with the end in mind, like Stephen Covey says, and begin with the end in mind and plan everything out from there. And then every week you meet with your accountability partners and he talks about how you should have no more than 2 to 4. I would say 4 rather than 2, because you and someone else, it's better to have more. I'd say 4 people, in my opinion. I think any more than that, you get meetings would probably be too long. But I found it fascinating, and I so agree with you. Like, if I hadn't I think I would have gone further in my entrepreneurial career if I had A, looked for a mentor like you've talked about, and B, joined a mastermind group, if you will, in that regard. So that being said, thank you so much again for sharing that. What inspired you to start? I mean, I know you talked about the web design agency. So the guy the kayaking instructor, did he just inspired you? And what was it about web design then that just you were like, wow, this is amazing?
Yeah. So I say again, this was 22 years ago. So we're working on dial up, right?
Oh,
There's no like online classes. Like I'm literally reading books to teach myself, like how to design
HTML.
logos. Yes. And HTML and all of that, and driving to Sacramento because there was a class somewhere. And I just found that I loved working with clients. It's a very intimate connection when you're creating their brand and their website, right? It can be. And helping them see their vision and their mission and their passion come through in their brand and in their website. That is what I love, is them going, you took my vision and you created it in a website, and in my brand. I love that.
Yeah. It can be a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
It can be a nightmare.
Absolutely. Anybody who's been in business and worked with, people, we know that is true.
Hey, can you talk a little bit about ADA compliance and website accessibility?
Oh my gosh, I would so love to. So first of all, ADA compliance and accessible website are the same thing. I just want people to know. In the US, we say ADA because we have the Americans with Disabilities Act. Elsewhere, you'll hear accessibility. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It basically means doing what needs to be done to a website based on the code level, on the first surface level, so that anybody of any ability can use the site as it's meant to be used. But here's the thing, Matt. People think of accessibility. When we think of ADA compliance or accessibility, we think of the physical part. That's what we come to mind. So we think of somebody who's in a wheelchair, or somebody who's blind, or even maybe somebody who's deaf. That's what we think of.
Yes.
But digital accessibility has a much larger reach, massive. We're talking about people with ADHD, people with dyslexia, color blindness, autism, epilepsy, people with trembling hands, which is, just a lot of older adults that don't have a disability. We're talking about short-term memory, maybe older adults, or cognitive. So it's a massive reach. It's a massive reach, digital accessibility.
Wow. What made you decide to focus on becoming a web accessibility guru, if you will, expert?
So during the pandemic, myself and, so many others, we struggled with being cut off, right? We were cut off from those things that made life rich, robust, and memorable. As a matter of fact, it created a global mental health crisis, right? We know this.
Absolutely.
And so, it just struck me that this is what people with disabilities experience every single day. Because the web is largely inaccessible to them, they are cut off from, buying tickets to the art opening, or, booking that B&B, et cetera, right? Mm-hmm. We even found that there was, the website where you could register to get a vaccine was not accessible to people who were blind. Like the COVID vaccine, they could not register. Wow. It was, exactly. So this is the kind of thing. And then it struck me because my brother is disabled. He is epileptic and developmentally delayed.
Okay.
He and my mom are the most important people in my life. And so I have a lifetime of experience. I was a Special Olympics volunteer for 20 years, and I worked in a special education classroom, and I ran a camp for kids and adults with disabilities. So it struck me. I have everything needed to make a change. I have a lifetime of experience. This was, when I was having this change, a lifetime of experience with people with disabilities. Yeah. I have a dynamite dream team of web designers, branders, marketers, etc.
Sure.
And from that, Access Design Studio was born, where we focus now on making the web accessible to everybody.
So was it specifically the pandemic that made you focus in realizing that, oh yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So before that, was accessibility for you just something you didn't know about, or web accessibility, or like, how did you, because I know you've been doing this for a long time, like 22 years designing websites. And was it just like, all of a sudden it was like, whoa, it was a wake up call? So if the pandemic wouldn't have happened, that's what I'm trying to understand is all I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. Well, here's what happened, Matt, is like, I kept hearing about this thing called web accessibility. This is, for years now, right?
Yeah.
And I would reach out, and I know many other, web design agency owners, because I'm a huge networker, as we talked about. And in 22 years, I've created a lot of relationships, and I would reach out, and invariably I would get some response like this: I'm not touching it with a 10-foot pole. It's way too complex, et cetera, et cetera. And I kept hearing that. And so I was in that place of like, how do I do, I just was in this place of, how do I do this? Should I take it on? When the pandemic hit and it became so clear, the inequity, we were all on the web for everything. And when I thought about people with disabilities not being able to have that lifeline, I was like, I don't care what it takes for me and my team. And we took a year. We trained for a year. My developer trained for a year. It's very technical. And so we were like, we became accredited experts. I'm like, we're doing this.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, can you share an example of a successful website redesign that incorporated ADA compliance measures?
Absolutely. You mean the URL of, or?
No, that's in general terms. Like maybe you did something, like you don't have to reveal the URL if you don't want to. Maybe you did a site for a hotel or a resort or a hairstylist, or I'm just grasping at straws here, or a plumber or someone like that, just in general terms.
Yeah, many. And if somebody, wants to check it out, because people think, an ADA compliant site's going to be ugly, right? They think that there's going to be some monochromatic or something. First of all, you can check out my site, Access Design Studio. It is fun. It's vibrant. It pops. And it is completely, accessible. Reverie Retreat, which is a retreat center.
Retreat.
Yep. .com. It's a retreat center in the Sierra Nevada foothills, and they have yurts. It's glamping, right? They're closed right now because they're doing a bunch of building of ADA compliant cottages, etc. But the website itself, it's vibrant. It pops. There, you would never look at it and think, oh gosh, you would never know, except that if you are disabled, you would absolutely know, because it would be it would be frictionless, right? Or Skinner Winery, Skinner Vineyards. They are a big winery. Their site is also ADA compliant, and you can check these sites out and go, they're gorgeous. There's nothing here that says, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at them now. They are, and people can check them out. Yeah, absolutely.
And people with disabilities will have a frictionless experience, because we know many things. One is, let's hope we all want equal access, right? We want equal access. And as business owners or managers, we must consider ROI, of course, right?
Absolutely.
One of the huge things about an accessible website is, and we can get into numbers here in a second, but it's providing that amazing guest or visitor experience. It's frictionless. And we know that if anyone runs into friction, they leave. They're gone are the days that we'll try and figure things out on a website. We take off. We're going to find somebody who's created a great experience. Absolutely. Absolutely. So what were some of what were some of the things that you redesigned in those sites, like the before and after story? Like, for instance, Reverie Retreat. Like, what did you have to do to that site in a redesign to make it compliant? Yeah, there are lots of things that need to be done on the code end. So, for example, making sure that if a screen reader is reading something, that it's telling them the same thing that a visioned person can use. For example, that it's navigation, or that there is an expandable drop-down menu, etc. So it's a lot on the code end. On the more visual end, I want you and anybody listening or watching to vision this with me, right? if you have a form, a lot of times the name of the field of the form is inside the form box.
Yeah.
So it might say name, and inside of that box, it says name, right? So that when you start typing, you put your cursor in there.
It disappears.
The word name disappears. So think about this. If you have short-term memory issues, if you have ADHD, if you have, or if you just get up, anybody to, refresh your cup of coffee while you're filling out that form, you come back, you no longer know what is supposed to go in that.
No, I know. I've experienced and been frustrated.
And then you have to refresh, and often it erases everything you've done, and you have to start
all over.
Right?
If it's a long form. Yep. I've been there.
Exactly. I mean, we all lose our mind in those moments.
Oh, I get pissed off. Yeah.
Totally. So the solution is you put the name of the form field above the box. So when they click in the box, it still says name. It's a very simple but profound difference.
Yeah. I think the reason why designers and marketers started doing it, at least from my perspective, why I started doing it but stopped, is it just made forms look prettier.
It's sexier. It's true.
It's sexier, but I would rather now enable and provide accessibility than sexy. In that regard.
And that friction that you and I just talked about, that frustration, people are gone. They're out.
Yeah. So what about other things? Like, for instance, I see this happening in particularly in screen readers, like the structure of the site when it comes to headings. Like, for instance, going from H1, H2, once you go from H1 to H2 to H3, there's no going back again to an H2 for the structure of the site, because it's not compliant, is what I've been told. I don't know if that's true or not.
It's not true. Yeah.
Okay.
You can go back to H2. H2 is going to be another subheading of H1, right?
Yeah.
So let's say we're talking about tours in national parks, right?
Yeah.
And there might be walking tour. That's an H2. And then there's all of the H3, all of the information about the walking tour, right?
Okay.
And then there's going to be bike tours. That can be an H2.
Okay.
If it makes sense on that page.
Yeah, so you can go H1, H2, H3, H3, and then boom, back to H2?
If it makes structural sense on that page, absolutely, you can do that.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Man. Interesting. Well, how do people find out what's true and what's not true? Because I had somebody tell me that is, if you do that, it's not ADA compliant. And I'm like, well, shoot, that makes building sites a hell of a lot pretty damn difficult. Like, when you want to follow a structure of H1, H2, H3, 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 and then maybe, or H3, H4, H4, and then boom, back to an H2.
It's absolutely, yep. It's, you can find it out there are a couple of different ways. There are a couple of AI scanners that you can use, that use artificial intelligence, which can address about 30%, some very basic accessibility issues, but they can help you determine if your structure is correct. Now, here's the thing, Matt. Thank you so much for saying that you were told something that was incorrect. There are so many people out there right now saying that they do accessibility, and because it's the big keyword, right? Everybody it's the hot market. Ask them, are you accredited? Like, what is your training? Like, there are just so many people. I don't think they're doing it on purpose, but accessibility is very, very technical, and your average developer, your average coder, your programmer is just not going to know. They're not going to know what they need to know.
Yeah. So apart from reading the legislation, I mean, because that's obviously what you could do, but none of us are lawyers, and then calling a lawyer to do that. So in other words, what you're saying is training is
absolutely.
key.
Yeah.
And you spent a year doing that training.
Yeah. I had my developer. Yeah, my developer spent a year, training and taking various classes, and Yeah.
What? So you talk about accreditation. Where can people get that accreditation and training?
Yeah, we got DEQUE University has some training modules. There are some very specific. WCAG has some, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines has some really good training modules. I'm happy to. Is there a way that I can share some links?
Yeah, if you want to just throw them out there and tell me what they are, we'll put them in the show notes.
Okay, great. Right now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I would have to look them up, Matt. So let me.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, one sec. So you'd mentioned that I don't know how to pronounce it. It's DEQUE. Is it? I'm not going to try.
I'm not sure as well.
University.
I've only seen it written. Yeah.
They should change the name of their university. But anyway, this university, DEQUEuniversity.com, has some courses on web accessibility. And then you were mentioning one other thing through the Web3 Consortium has a foundational online course that people can check out.
Yeah, there's that as well. And that's a really good, foundational. That's a free online course. And then there are others that can really help your developer dig into the nitty gritty because it's very technical. But it does take a significant amount of time and dedication to training.
Okay. What are your thoughts on people who argue against or ignore ADA and web accessibility?
Well, first of all, I understand why, because there's so much contradictory information out there. It's technical, etc. And you are not doing your clients justice. You just aren't. I mean, 1 billion people worldwide have a disability, 1 billion with a $7 trillion spending power, right?
Oh, wow.
In the United States, we have 61 million people with a disability, and they have a $654 billion disposable income. In the UK, there's 14 million people. In Canada, there are 6 million people with a massive spending power. So if you are ignoring accessibility, not only are you putting your clients at legal risk, in the US, huge legal risk because we do love our lawsuits, right? In the US, but you're also you're missing out on 25% of the market. You are not doing justice to your clients.
Wow, and that's the thing. I was sharing in a Facebook group about this, and people were dismissing it, saying, it's not that big a deal. And I've heard horror stories of people getting sued. And you just said it, like in the United States, it's Americans love lawsuits. I don't know why. But man, you can get sued for I'm being facetious, but it's almost like you get sued for looking at someone the wrong way, but whatever.
Totally.
And I heard a lot of lawsuits are coming out of California. The lawyers, they want to make money. I don't think their motivation is to be a do-gooder. No, I could be wrong. I don't know their mind thinking, but money obviously motivates people. So they are looking at this as an opportunity to make money. And absolutely. I've heard horror stories of people getting sued, and yet people still dismiss it. I mean, unless I'm mistaken, like the penalty can be around, I don't know what the minimum amount is, but I've heard of lawsuits of like $4,000.
Oh my God, that's a tiny amount.
That's a tiny amount.
Yeah. And you're so, lawsuits in the US have increased over 1,000%, and web, digital accessibility over 1,000% in the last 2 years. And you're right. The majority of them come from about 10 law firms, and they're just going, it's such low hanging fruit.
For them.
And exactly. And 4,000 is a tiny payout. Okay. I mean, a tiny payout. Now, most of them will settle outside of court because they aren't, they're just looking, like you said, to.
Yeah.
But then once you get sued, you are a huge target to be sued again. So you need to make your site accessible. So what I always tell people is skip the lawsuit. Skip the lawsuit.
Skip the lawsuit. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And don't wait for the lawsuit to happen. Just skip the lawsuit and invest that money.
Invest the money
in ahead of time rather than having to pay the lawsuit and invest the money.
Exactly. Exactly. Like you're going to have to make your site accessible. So, and if it's, not today, it's going to be as soon as you're sued. So, and this is what I tell people, Matt, is be a leader, because this becomes then part of your brand.
Yeah.
We care about equal access we care about everybody's experience. Then it becomes part of, who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, there are services, there's plugins, there's people that are pitching WordPress plugins. I even had somebody pitch me on LinkedIn, and I just don't see how that can solve the problem. It's so complex. Like, is there, I don't know if there's AI solutions out there that do it, because like, it seems like a lot of work. And so have you had any experience with those solutions, so-called solutions?
So-called solutions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Buyer, be very careful. Buyer beware. AI can only address about 30% of accessibility issues. Now, these plugins or overlays, or there are a few that are big hitters, and their languaging makes it sound like, if you know what you're looking for, you can read between the lines. But if you don't, their languaging makes it sound like they're making your site ADA compliant. They absolutely are not. They absolutely cannot. These toolbars can only address about 30% of issues. It takes a trained human. So you've left 70% of the issues unaddressed. So thank you for bringing that up. It's a very large, the IAAP, which you said, as you said, I'm a member of the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. They recently sent out an email that said, and I am not quoting them here because I don't have it memorized, but it basically said, we are aware that the dangers that these present, because they're making it sound like they make the site accessible. We are, coming up with a strategy to address it, etc. So do not, if you are a digital marketer or a business owner, do not get sucked into that trap. Read their reviews and you will see one after the other that says, we thought our site was accessible until we got sued. 25% of lawsuits last year were against websites that had those toolbars on them.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
So I noticed you've talked about how complicated it is, but like, what is it that makes a site accessible? For instance, you mentioned the forms.
Yeah.
In that way, but you also mentioned somebody who's colorblind. So what is for instance, of making a website accessible for someone who's colorblind?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So this happens a lot. Let's say you have a calendar, right? You have a booking agent. And the calendar is, you're going through the dates, and all that happens, like you're on the 3rd of March, and then you're moving to the 4th of March, and you're moving to the 5th of March. If all that happens is that changes color, right? Maybe it goes from a light green to a dark green to show where you are on the calendar. Somebody who's colorblind may not be able to see that. Or back to our form, right? You submit a form, right? And you get that nasty gram that says you have missed a form field.
Yeah.
If all that happens is a red box comes around it, that shows that this is the form field you've missed. For somebody who's colorblind, that's going to look like a shade of gray, some shade of gray, the same color as the form field box.
Yeah.
And so they have no idea. And we've all had that happen. You're like, where is this? And then, you're super frustrated. So all that needs to happen is we put the word above it. The red box is fine. Let's leave the red box. But then you put above it a little asterisk that says required. So that pops up if you've missed it. A simple but profound change.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what about putting it in the label as well? Like all the time, the asterisks required.
That is great, as long as the only thing that you're not just putting just a red within the box.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You could put a little message. You could put some kind of message. So if you put the top label is, first name beside it, star asterisk required.
Yeah.
And then maybe if the mistake happens or they don't fill it out, you could put a message under the bottom of the form field. Please fill this out. You missed this. Oops, you missed this.
Yeah. Missing field, whatever.
Yeah.
As long as it's not just, a red box to show that's missing. Yeah.
Okay. And what about other things? Like, for instance, color contrast with graphics. Like I know one, I say this not to sound arrogant, but like I do have a diploma in web design and from Sessions EDU, and it cost me a lot of money. And, one of the techniques for web design was used for hero images, was using a hero image in the background.
Yeah.
And then putting a transparent color overlay over top of it.
Yeah.
And, I tend to make my images black and white for hero images and then use the color overlay over top. But are there any things people should look out for when doing that? Or is that something that should be avoided entirely?
Yeah, contrast is a big one, right? And that's one that it affects a lot of people. A lot of people have low vision, or it affects people with autism, with ADHD, right? I mean, all of these things taken into account, right? So yeah, there are color contrast ratios and there are lots of free ratio checkers. Color contrast, if you do a Google search
just
for
Google color contrast ratio checker.
Yeah. Checker. Yeah. They'll come up and you can check certain things. Now you're right. That sort of transparent text over an image, that's not great contrast. Or what we'll find is, a lot of times we'll have an image. Let's say you have an image of a hot air balloon over a city, right? And then you have text over that. A lot of times the text will go like you have light text, white text. It might look great over the bright orange and red and green hot air balloon, but then when it goes over, say, the sky, it might be a little too light and it might not meet the contrast ratios. That happens a lot. So you can just, darken that back area just subtly. I've done this a million times, right? Darken the back area, that certain area of the image, in Photoshop, or it can be that that text is moving over the image, so you might need to make it a different color. You do need to take those things into account to make sure that it's seeable and usable for everybody.
Are there any online checkers that you prefer, like that? I noticed you mentioned that some of them get 30%. Is there any others? Like, is there an online, someone wants to know.
Yeah.
They want to go and check their website, saying, how bad is it? Or a web designer wants to know on an ongoing basis. Are there any Chrome extensions? Or
yes, there
websites
is.
that you recommend, that you personally use?
Yes, you can use something called Wave.
Okay.
And
that's from webaim.org. That's wave.webaim.org.
You're exactly right.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's a plugin. That's an extension you can put on Chrome.
Oh, and then they have an extension. Yeah.
It's fantastic. And you were talking about your structure a bit ago in your H1 and your H2s. They will help you out with that. So you can put in the extension and then you just bring up any website and you click on the extension and it'll show you a couple of, it addresses color contrast. It can address your structure. Again, it's AI, so it's only going to get maybe 30%, but it's really helpful, and I use it all the time. A lot of times, somebody will come to me and they'll say, "I don't know if my site is ADA compliant," right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like we're sort of all hoping, I hope it is. Well, if you haven't had discussions with it about your developer and you haven't hired, a train, it's not. But it's this is a great tool to click on. I have the extension in my, in Chrome, and then it can tell me errors. It can tell me contrast issues. It can have it shows alerts, which is like, this may not be a WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines violation, but best practice is to do this. Yeah. So it's a great starting tool.
Right on.
Yeah.
Hey, what about when it comes to SEO? Are there is SEO influenced by accessibility?
Yes, and this is another reason why, if marketing agencies or web designers are ignoring accessibility, they are not doing their clients. They're not doing right by their clients, because an accessible website Google ranks it higher for a couple of reasons. One is 25% of the population has a disability, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course,
Absolutely.
Google, as we know, wants to always serve up results that are usable and valuable by the largest number of people.
Yeah.
An accessible website is usable and more valuable to 25% more of people. So of course, Google's going to say, well, yeah, I'm going to rank this site higher. Does that make sense? Did I explain that well?
Absolutely makes sense. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, the other thing is that Google can read. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
One, of the principles of accessibility, and this is one that the untrained, person can do, is adding alt tags to every image, and that's just a short description of an image.
Okay.
Well, Google can read those. Google can read alt text. Google can read transcripts of videos, right? So if you have your video transcribed, Google can't hear your video, but can read your transcript and then rank you for that content. So there are just so many ways that accessibility helps SEO.
So for images, making sure you have your alt texts and not keyword stuffing, but actually describing the image of what it's about.
Exactly. And we all know that keyword stuffing is, Google doesn't like keyword stuffing no matter what reason, for the end user and for Google. Google wants to see that every site has alt tags. Every image has alt tags.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, the more images you have, I'm thinking of I used to work for a car dealership, and they had, minimum 200 or 400, let's just say 200 units of inventory and 30 pictures each. That's a minimum of 6,000 images. I have no idea how they would, the amount of man hours that would take for them to put in alt descriptions for each image. And they have inventory changing every day.
Right.
It would probably take a full-time employee, a merchandiser, I'm thinking, to be able to do that. I don't know if there's any other way.
Yeah. So there are some of those plugins we talked about can address alt tags. But here's the thing, Matt, I have seen them I wanted to test one out, right?
Yeah.
It took me and my assistant longer to go and fix all of the crazy alt tags, than to just do it.
Yeah.
And that's why one of the things that we offer is regular accessibility review of a website, and we can fix those. We can fix those issues.
Yeah. Knowing what I know, how car industry works, because they use inventory management systems with apps that have, you take a unit, comes in, and I know because I designed the entire process. You take 30 pictures from start to finish, from one side of the car all the way around to the other. And a plugin would never do it, because you literally would have to take those pictures, and it would be harder to do from an app.
Yeah.
But I guess they would have to and I'm just thinking out loud here. They'd have to then go and log into the desktop version of the site, the IMS we called it, and go through those images and add the unless the IMS themselves were going to program it into the software to add that label automatically. But otherwise, no, I don't see. Yeah, I don't see how. Because if you're taking a picture of a front passenger or front driver's side mirror, which you do,
right,
you're gonna have to add Toyota Camry front 1998 2018 Toyota Camry front driver's side mirror.
Right. Yeah.
There's no way AI can figure that out. It's just not.
Yeah. Absolutely
impossible.
not.
Yeah. Anyway, well, that's been fascinating talking to you. What's one big takeaway you want listeners to get from this episode?
I want listeners to understand that there are, 3 prongs to accessibility. One is quality and dignity of life for real human beings, right? Like
Absolutely.
get in touch with our heart for a second. And I think we can all go, we want equal access. It's worth the effort just for that principle, quality and dignity of life for real human beings.
Yeah. Excluding the narcissists that are out there, but I agree with you.
Excluding, yeah, exactly. And that there is ROI in website accessibility, right? Unlike, people think of that maybe $25,000, wheelchair ramp they had to build, which I still think is, equal access for everybody. But I get that as a business owner, if you have a physical location and you put whatever, 15 grand into that ramp, you're feeling like you're never going to get the ROI off of that. Well, digital accessibility is different. You're talking about 25% of the population. There is ROI. And then the third, we're talking, diversity, equity, and inclusion is huge. Include ability in that equation. We forget about ability. We think about gender and religion and race as well. We should, and we forget about ability. But when we're focusing on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and sustainability, we must include ability. Equal access.
Absolutely. Hey, again, it's been a pleasure having you here. How can our listeners connect with you online if they choose to do so?
Yeah, so you can go to accessdesignstudio.com and connect with me there. And also we have I can hop on with anybody and do a video review like this of your site with you, of any site. I'm happy to, show you kind of what's going on in there.
Right on.
And then I'm on LinkedIn and sorry.
Cool. Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah. LinkedIn, Denise Pane, spelled Pane, or Access Design Studio, both on LinkedIn.
Right on.
Would love to connect with anybody. I want to answer anyone's questions because my biggest goal is that everybody can have those experiences that make life rich and robust. And that does mean equal access on the web.
Cool. Hey, thank you so much for being here. We'll make sure to put that information in the show notes. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's been such a pleasure, Matt, and you ask fantastic questions. Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much. You have a great day.
Thank you.